Good afternoon. You're with KTAL FM in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We're 101.5 on the dial. We're also streamed live at lccommunityradio.org. This is a relatively new show called Science. Let's take a look. And we'll go through all kinds of aspects of science as we did the last time. I have two guests with me in the studio today. I have Kira Durrett on my left and Arabella Camuñez on my right. So let me get them up here. Let's see. Your mic is 3? It's well, we'll see. I'm pretty sure it is. Okay, try it.
Like now?
Yeah, I need your mic up. Let's see. Okay, try it.
I'm 3. I'm 3.
Okay. I'll put both of you up. Okay, Kira. Oh, is that my? It looked like it was my shoe. Anyway, Kira, are you ready?
No.
Okay. You've been with us how long at the Las Cruces Academy, which is our nonprofit private school in Mesilla? That started in 2009 with classes. You joined us later.
Yeah, I joined at the start of middle school, so about 3 years.
Okay, and Arabella, you've been with us much longer, right?
I've been at the school since 2010, I believe. Yeah.
Right, that was the second year we were in operation, and we were in the downtown mall at that time. So you're now in middle school, which was a program that we started...
when we joined middle school?
Yeah. Was that 2014?
I believe so.
Okay. So right now I'm your teacher in science and tennis and middle school project. So would either one of you like to jump in and say what we do in science? Go ahead.
We do all sorts of fun experiments. A favorite of mine was when we made a model rocket last year, and we get to do experiments that you wouldn't normally get to do, and they're always a lot of fun.
So, Kira, you were in on the rocket experiment too, and as I recall, you were out in the field. You were both at observing stations far apart. And do you remember why we had to be so far apart? Or what we were observing, really?
Well, we were trying to measure the rockets to see how high and far they went.
And that was pretty tricky?
Yeah, we used these really complicated equations, I guess, that none of us completely understood. And we had to be pretty far out because it was... When you're closer, if you got it off by just a tiny little bit, that could be meters. But when you're farther apart, getting it off by a tiny little bit is much less.
Right. And what was the object of measuring the altitude of the rocket? Kira, do you want to remember? Think back. What was that, a year ago or so?
Yeah, it was last year.
Last September.
Yeah.
So where did we do it? We didn't do it inside the school.
We did literally right next to a mountain.
Okay. So we were trapping out there in the creosote bush and all that. And what were we, as I recall, we had a hypothesis we were testing.
Our hypothesis was that the height of the rocket was directly proportional to the amount of gunpowder in the engine, I believe.
Right. In fact, I tweaked that a bit because I wasn't sure. I'd done the rocket simulation equations, and I thought it might be a higher power. So we were testing which one. And then we did a plot in Excel to see how it all worked out. And did it? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one of the experiments we did. What were we talking about on the way here? There was some other experiment that you thought was pretty interesting.
Oh, so this is also in 6th grade. Mr. Vince got a blowtorch, and he turned it on, and he gave us all cornstarch, and we had to put it in our mouth and quickly blow it out without letting it get too wet with our saliva. And if we did that, it became like a really cool colored flame.
Right, and kind of gummy in the mouth, too, as I recall.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no avoiding that. But it is a pretty cool experiment. You don't think of cornstarch as being flammable, but anything that is burnable at any point and you get it into a fine dispersion, that's going to burn in a flame, a pretty dramatic flame. Let's see. So you've been in science now, certainly in middle school, for 2.5 years. Is that right? Okay. So what do you think that does for your view of future careers, or even not so far in the future?
I've always been interested in science stuff, and the science we do at school, I guess, has been a big part of why. Like, we studied astronomy like 3 times before I was like 11, and I'm interested in astronomy and space stuff as a future career. So learning about astronomy so much, like the first time we studied astronomy, I think I was like 7, so that definitely probably helped.
And you went to space camp this past summer, is that right?
Yes.
That was in
Huntsville, Alabama.
Huntsville. And that was fairly interesting from what I hear.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I went there on scholarship, which was a long process, but definitely worth it. And my favorite thing we did there was a simulation of a lunar mission, and I got to be a mission commander, which is, well, it actually made me want to maybe work in actual mission control in the future.
And you cut off somebody's oxygen in the simulation, is that right?
I did not know. I was told everything was good with the life support systems, and then in the what's supposed to be 14 days later, but we skipped like 13 and a half days, I was told, oh, wait, they never had any oxygen. And, well, we'd been told beforehand, if the crew gets killed, most of you just lose your jobs. Mission commander, you're going to jail. And I'm like, great, I'm going to jail now.
And Kira, I remember that you wanted to be, was it zoologist?
Yeah, a zoologist.
And now you've morphed into
Yeah, it's
about
like
8
I have
different...
a bunch of different ideas. I'm not actually sure anymore.
Did you say law as one possibility?
Yeah, I'm thinking about becoming a lawyer.
Uh-huh. What kind of a lawyer? Environmental lawyer? Maybe?
That I am not sure about.
Okay, so we've got zoologist. Is that still on the table?
Yeah.
Law?
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Probably photography, business, and maybe archaeology.
Ah, maybe you could do them all. I can't imagine how. But so do you think your experience at the academy primed you to look so wide a field?
I guess maybe, like, I'm not really sure where I came up with most of these.
Yeah, it just happens, right. Okay, what else do you want to say about your experience doing science? Do you have any other interesting observations? I remember Llewellyn Kay, Dr. Llewellyn Kay is our head of school. She's my wife, and she told me, don't talk about the things that went wrong. Okay, we've had no deaths, no injuries. Oh, well, no, that's not true. We had solder iron burns. Do you want to talk about how that happened? What were we doing?
Well, we were soldering, like, different things for one of our really big projects that called the periodic table. And we were starting to solder wires, and some people weren't careful, and, well, it didn't turn out so great.
Well, I'm not sure how careful you're going to be. It's sort of a rite of passage. If you're soldering, you're going to burn yourself at some time. Okay, so how does soldering tie into the periodic table? Arabella, do you want to?
Well, the periodic table we made is probably unlike any periodic table you've seen before. Ours is in a shadow box, I believe, and we drilled holes behind each of the elements and put an LED in. And there's narrations that play as the different elements light up, and there's a bunch of different programs, and we had to do the programming to play the narrations and decide which elements and lights would light up, and we had to solder the physical wires that did it.
So it took 3 years. That's by my accounting. You say it's even longer.
Yeah. Like 4 years? You said it was 4.5?
We started in 4th grade and finished in like 6th or 7th.
7th, I think.
Okay. Well, there is one cutoff because the inspiration for me to propose the project to all these students who were, what, 4th grade was the oldest or 5th grade?
4th grade was the youngest.
The youngest, okay. Was when we visited Arecibo Radio Observatory, which is in an interesting situation right now. It's in Puerto Rico. It's in a big dish. There's a big dish that's dug into the landscape. It's a huge radio telescope. It's been used to explore what's going on in the ionosphere and to monitor distant stars, for example. They had a museum, probably still do, that had a periodic table, but there were only 3 selections. You could push a button and the elements from the Big Bang would light up. And we have that. And then there's another one that shows what happens in a supernova. We've got that. But then we put in 5 different options. That was only one, those 2 were parts of what we call nucleosynthesis. And so do you remember what the other 4 programs were? Here, do you remember what we were going through?
There were like others, like the human body, the elements in the Earth's crust, and I'm not really sure what the other ones are.
Okay, do you remember?
There was also the order of discovery from the elements that were known to the ancients, like gold and tin, to our periodic table only went up to copernicium, which is element 112, which I'm fairly sure was the most recently discovered on ours. And then we also had atomic number ones, which gave you about 15 seconds worth of information about an element.
So I guess you, Arabella, did the majority of them, but lots of people contributed to the narrations. And how did we develop those? Because we're trying to engage people who are going to sit down at this periodic table, push buttons, and go through a program. So how did we decide on what kind of information goes into the narrations?
We only chose stuff that we thought would be interesting. I wrote a lot of these in 4th grade, so if they were like super boring to me then, I likely didn't put it in. We put in stuff like how people use them in everyday life and interesting facts. Sometimes we put boiling and melting point, but we didn't put like sentences and sentences about the like molecular structure.
Right. But you basically derived all these yourself. And then we sat down as a group to go through them and say, does it have the right kind of content that would interest people? Is it the right length? And then recording sometimes was an ordeal, right?
Yeah.
So what were the challenges there?
Well, once we got Audacity, which was the recording program we used to start working, if we were in a very quiet room, if you had 1 or 2 people in there, they could get it done pretty fast. But we started by using other programs, I believe, and those did not work at all. But it worked fairly well once we got to Audacity.
Right, but then there was a lot of worries about stumbling over a word or something, and we would sometimes re-record things 5 times to get it absolutely down pat.
Especially for the discovery ones where they were discovered by some German person and we're like, we cannot pronounce that ever. And so...
Well, the one who could pronounce it was Allegra Reinhold because she grew up in a family that speaks some German. But then there's Dutch names and everything else, so
yeah,
we got through it. And I think it was a really nice accomplishment. So it's about 1:15. I think we'll take a break here. You're listening to KTAL LPFM at 101.5 in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We're also streamed live at lccommunityradio.org. Thanks for listening.